You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Welcome into another edition of Inside Automotive right here at the CBT Automotive Network. The Presidio Group NCM Average Dealership Performance Benchmark Report is out. From profitability to inventory and interest rate impacts, this report gives us a snapshot of the industry in 2024. Here to walk us through the findings and the takeaways is Mr. George Karolis. You've seen him here before on CBT News. He's the president of the Presidio Group. Thank you so much, George, for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks. Good to be back.
Yeah. It's we're back, I should say, from NADA, which was a little bit of a unique show this year, right?
That was fun.
Did you survive it?
We did. We did. That was unique.
Yeah.
Unique experience.
What were some of the things you heard from dealers? What are some of their pain points or concerns? Or
at NADA, the ones that showed.
The ones that showed, right.
A lot more optimism versus pain points.
Yeah.
Which
that's what I got
too. Report kind of confirms, right? The fourth quarter was stellar for most dealers.
Yeah.
Obviously, for most brands, or some brands that were not stellar, but a lot of optimism, a lot of positivity going into 2025. We saw that actually in our survey results that we talked about last time we were together as well.
Right.
So that's kind of just more points confirming the same.
Okay. So George, before we get into the report itself, tell me about the report.
Sure. Look, we're really excited about our partnership with NCM. Right now, this is the only industry data available for a large number of private dealers that report their results to NCM in the industry. This represents north of 20% of the total dealers in the U.S., around 4,000. To date, we have public companies, 6 of them, is about 6% of the industry reporting.
Okay.
And now with this data, it comes out before the public's report, and it gives you a big glimpse of how the average dealer has performed around the country, the average private dealer, representing around 4,000 dealers.
Right.
So really exciting to be able to release margin and profitability trends for that many dealers, and sort of ahead of much of the reporting that's out there in the industry.
And it's fresh data. I mean,
fresh data.
This isn't like something we're talking about that happened 6 months ago, or let's take a look at last year.
That's right.
It's
a few weeks after quarter ends. That's right.
That's great. And how did dealership profitability trend in 2024 compared to the previous year?
Yeah. So through the first 9 months, it was consistently trending around 33% or so off. Versus the prior year, each quarter, same trend, a little
33% off.
Yeah, about a third. And then the fourth quarter, we saw the fourth quarter wipe that out and trend positively. I think some of that election results. I think December was probably one of the best Decembers in a long time. And so the average dealership ended the year at just shy of 25%, 24, just under 25% off.
Okay.
So bucked the trend, which means fourth quarter was generally flat versus the prior fourth quarter to buck that trend as much as it did. So the data suggests, and so does our survey, that the industry is really kind of at the sort of tail end of the normalization process that we've been going on since we've hit the peaks from COVID.
Sure.
And most dealers are sort of feeling the same way. It's really optimism and kind of feels like the new normal is set in. Of course, not all brands are made equal.
Right. Yeah, we'll jump into that. But what contributed to the shift, do you think?
I think the margin deterioration has really slowed on the new and used side. We saw margins off for the year about 33%. The prior year they were off about 20%. So off about 50% from the peaks. Yeah. And that's on the new side, right? And so now they've really, that kind of deterioration has really sort of flattened. And then we saw strength in fixed operations. Fixed operations gross profit up for the year on average about 4.6%.
Nice.
A couple of the public companies have released earnings in the last few days, as we're in Group 1. And we've seen that similar trend. They've actually done even better on the fixed side. Our survey that we also put out at the fourth quarter confirmed that about 80% of dealers said that fixed is a bright spot. So fixed operations really sort of helped offset that those negative trends. We've seen expenses a little stickier, especially on the personnel side. Basically, personnel expenses flat for the year.
Okay.
And advertising and floor plan obviously have ticked up, but that fixed gross trend of positivity has offset sort of those pressures on expenses.
Yeah.
And then again, the new and used margins kind of sort of moderating their fall.
Okay. And what does all of this mean to the person that's out there that's thinking about maybe selling in 2025?
Maybe selling. That's a good question. I don't necessarily know that that really changes the mindset of someone that's interested in buying or selling. Right?
Okay.
The industry,
Yeah.
Sort of a long-term view. It does help when you take that, what we call that EKG of earnings, unpredictability out of the mix, and it feels like we're in a sort of more normal process. Someone mentioned to me the other day, said, "Oh, we're in a correction. The correction is a correction over?" And I said, "I don't really think we should use that word correction because we're just really normalizing from sort of these peaks that we saw driven by inventory and imbalances, supply-demand imbalances,
right?
But to a new normal, to a better place overall for the industry."
Yeah, sure. How have brand and geography become key differentiators in the dealership profitability story?
Yeah, they matter a ton. We're seeing the top tier brands. We call it in our survey the Magnificent Seven, which we talked about the last time.
So I love that term. Right.
That's great. Lexus, Toyota, Mercedes-Benz, Subaru, Honda, BMW, to name a few. And especially in the right geographies, business-friendly geographies, growth geographies, trending a lot better than some of the lower tiered brands that struggle. We've seen some challenges with Nissan and Stellantis over the last year or so.
Sure.
The story is drastically different for some of the brands that are struggling. And then for the Toyotas of the world, Toyota ended the year, a lot of dealers we spoke to ended the year with single-digit inventory supply on hand, and so that helps, right, your profitability and margin picture. Of course, dealers would like a few more cars, but there's a good equilibrium there.
Okay.
But generally speaking, brand is a key focus. Now, more and more dealers we speak to on a daily basis are all sort of talking about the brands more than they have in the past. Again, during the peaks of the pandemic, dealers would sort of take anything. Buyers were looking for anything, and sellers were kind of being able to sell anything. And now dealers are being a little bit more selective. Even though it is still a seller's market, we're seeing more selectivity, focus on brand and geography.
Even Stellantis and Nissan were hot, right?
Sure.
So F&I income improved slightly, up 0.3% to $1,581 per PVR for the full year. What trends are you seeing in F&I profitability?
Yeah, not a huge story there.
Yeah.
I think that's really just a consistency among dealers and their processes and following process and selling those products on the warranty side and of course on the credit side to the customers, but not really a lot to talk about there. Really, the story is more again fixed and the normalization of margins.
Whenever I would take a dealership over in my career and run it, the first place that I looked to was F&I, maybe because I was an F&I manager for 4 years in my life, my automotive life. Because if a store was running it, let's say $700 a copy, you knew right away that I could pick up another 100, 200 grand
or 1,000,
or
700, right?
Exactly, and an easy way to do that. And today, what do you guys look at when you're looking at a dealership in terms of profitability for F&I? What's a decent back end these days, PVR?
That high thousands to 2,000 a copy is really a good metric. The luxuries you'll see it a little higher.
Right.
But it's really looking at the consistency and the growth. To your point, if you're at 700 a copy, I think most buyers would be licking their chops thinking there's something wrong, there's an opportunity.
That's right.
But we look at really the whole picture, the four quadrants, if you will, on the new used F&I and of course fixed, how they all kind of interplay together.
Sure. The luxury segment performed better than domestic and import brands. What factors are helping luxury dealerships hold their margins better?
Yeah, look, there's fewer dealers, tremendous demand for premium vehicles. The affluent buyer has fared well and sort of weathered the storm a little better of inflation. But again, it's the dealer count, it's the great product that luxury brands make in the main, and we're seeing that price point has really ticked up across the board for all brands, of course. But as price points tick up, your margins are ticking up too as well.
Right. What steps should dealers take to sustain profitability in 2025? I know it's a very loaded question, right? We could probably be here all day with a whole checklist, but what are some of the things that come to mind?
Well, I'd probably have to ask that question to our friends from NCM who run best practice 20 groups every day.
Yes,
but,
that's right. They would have their hand on the pulse, that's for sure.
But a couple of the notable things in our data and our report is keep an eye on expenses. The personnel expenses have been stickier, so they're really flat year over year.
Yeah.
Even though these margins have decreased significantly off 50% from the peaks.
Sure.
And so paying attention to your personnel costs, your fixed costs are tough to manage, right? Because they are what they are, and that's a tougher. But there's controllable costs that you can focus on: advertising, general SG&A expenses, and so not taking your eye off the ball as things have come down.
Sure.
But again, it's a little stickier right now because of inflation, and so just not losing sight of all pieces of the business, making sure you have a balanced approach. But again, we're seeing a huge focus by a lot of dealers in fixed, and they're calling that the bright spot and what's going to help carry them through these times that we're in.
Yeah, for sure. Last year was a very good year for the industry in the area of M&A, and a very good year for Presidio, I might add. Do you feel it's going to be equal or better in 2025 for both the industry and your company?
Yeah, I think last year was a little choppier, and especially with sentiment. There was a lot of uncertainty with the election that was drawn out, and again, we were still in that sort of that middle to latter stage of normalization. Now that it feels like we're closer to the tail of that, and so it's creating more certainty and optimism for dealers that we're talking to. Our pipeline is larger than it's ever been. We're having more conversations than we ever have. We have more deals in the marketplace than we ever have, literally right now. And so it seems like it's off to a good start.
Yeah,
looking like it's going to be a robust year.
Sure.
But look, we're feeling it's a different market, different environment.
Yeah.
Buyers, again, are going to be a little bit more diligent and are paying a lot more attention now to what they're buying and how they're analyzing and evaluating transaction. And then sellers, on the other hand, sellers have to be realistic and rational in any market. It's a little easier to be irrational when we were at the peaks that we were a couple of years ago. But in the main, there's some sellers that are unrealistic. There's some deals that are unrealistic, and that's too wide of a spread. So some of those may not happen. But for rational sellers and rational buyers, should be a really robust year.
Good. What about the publics? Do you think we'll see the publics coming in a big way in 2025 with some acquisitions?
It appears so, especially the way they're speaking. We saw great results from Group 1 in Asbury last week. We saw Group 1 in particular flat or so on operating income in the fourth quarter, which is really tremendous versus the prior year, versus the industry, what it did. And Asbury had great results. You saw some really great fixed operations results from Asbury and Group 1. And so, they have a lot of liquidity, a lot of capital. They were a little quieter the last year and a half. And so we'd expect to see that pick up. After all, they are in the business of acquiring, but they're going to be rational and diligent. And probably not do something stupid. They have to have shareholders and a balanced approach to the markets. But we'd expect to see good pace there from the publics as well.
That's good. Yeah. So let me ask you, as we sit here today, it's been an active weekend in the sense that, President Trump puts his tariffs in place on Mexico and Canada. And of course, they turned right back around, at least in the case of Canada, and said, guess what? We can play that game too. What kind of an impact does news like that have for your industry and for your business and for your potential clients that are thinking about jumping in? Yeah.
And again, well, I think they announced just a few minutes ago that maybe Mexico has been delayed for 30 days or so. But when we talked last time, it seems to be Trump, part of his playbook is from a negotiating perspective. But if tariffs do come into play, that's a higher cost of a vehicle, right? Because of the tariff. And
they said an average of almost $3,000 a car. It might add from
And we're as we sit here, right now we're at the highest price point. From a vehicle sales price perspective we've ever been at, and so that could add some pressure to the consumer.
Sure.
Hopefully it's temporary. Hopefully it doesn't. We'll see what happens. But it's, we're seeing it in the stock market today. The news is stock markets are down because of the threat of tariffs. So it could have an impact. Again, there's a lot of vehicles that are made in the U.S. So will be interesting to follow. But this isn't the first time this administration has been here, and they've had this in the past.
A friend of mine that I spoke to over the weekend, he's 71 years old. He owns a dealer group, And he said, Jim, I'm getting too old for this with the up and the down and the viruses and the banking situation in 2008, 2009 and all that we've been through. And now we're talking about tariffs and EVs that we've been challenged with and what have you. Have you found that, that maybe that older generation of dealers out there that are like, hey, maybe this is time?
Yeah, all the time, right?
Yeah.
You can give him my number, by the way. If feel fine.
Right, we'll do that.
Right. That's a common, probably one of the most common reasons we see folks selling, right? Is kind of aging or been through enough cycles, made plenty of money. Most dealers, have more money than they'll ever know what to do with, and it's the love of the business and the thrill of the business. But at some point, you go through these cycles, and it's like not another cycle here of uncertainty.
Right.
Of course, we came out the last cycle on the positive end.
Yeah.
But that's a very common thing we see.
Yeah. You see so many dealers that get out of the business, sell their dealer group, and 2 years later they go out and buy. That's crazy to me, right? That
happens all the time.
They love it.
Yeah,
it's just they miss it and they get back into it.
Yeah, some like to try to sell high and buy low too. So
right.
It's interesting.
Right.
We have a lot of clients that we, they're long-term relationships that have a lot of dealerships, and so we'll help them sell deals here and there, but I've never met a dealer that wants to sell low and buy high.
Right.
So.
Right. Look at Larry Van Tile. I mean, he's
right. He's back in.
He's back in, and you just wonder what at what point in time are you just going to enjoy that yacht of yours and call it a day, right? It's like, why would you want the headache? But I think
it's his own. Yeah, it's passion and love for business. That's
yes,
right.
exactly. Yeah. So good year in 2025 from all indications.
It was looking that way, yeah. All the dealers we speak to on a regular basis, all sort of similar drumbeat.
Sure.
Again, coming off of a tremendous December, great fourth quarter.
Yeah.
And a lot of positivity in the markets and the environment with the new administration, more business-friendly approach. So
right, I heard that
looking that way.
That same sentiment from a number of dealers that I talked to in December, and they said, "Yeah, we're beyond the election, and from his viewpoint, our guy won, and we're
right.
in, we're feeling better about things, and that it's a huge opportunity right now for the industry." And then, of course, at NADA, as you know, we did so many interviews from the CBT stage, and everybody seemed to be very popular, very pro 2025. That it's going to be a great year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's going to be good for Presidio.
We hope so. And CBT.
You guys are always crushing it. So, George Karolis, president of the Presidio Group, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.